Everyone, welcome to Monday through Friday, Cellular Agriculture for a Pandemic-Free Future. This is episode number 7. My name is George Ortega, and it is Wednesday, July 15th, 2020 at 3:54 p.m. Eastern Time. I want to start today's episode by getting a bit more into preventing future pandemics through vaccinations. Basically, I've done a bit of research on this recently, and apparently we may be within, let's say, 10 years. I mean, there's different estimates. The World Health Organization estimates that by 2027, 7 years from now, we might have a universal vaccine. And again, it may not be a complete universal vaccine that works with both, for example, types of influenza. There's like type A and type B. I'm sorry, yeah. Well, actually, no, let me just actually get into that. So like, there's 4 types of influenza, A, B, C, and D. And apparently types B, C, and D aren't all that threatening or dangerous. It's type A we're worried about. But within type A, there's like there's subtypes like H5N1, which I believe is the avian flu, which is extremely dangerous. Then there's H1N1. And so like the universal vaccines they're working on may conceivably work on all subtypes. It may not work on all subtypes, but you know what they're working on is conferring immunity that lasts longer than our yearly flu shot. And the other thing is like our yearly flu shots are between 40 and 60% effective. So they're working on a universal vaccine that is at least 75% effective, that will work on at least 75% of people. So, but all right, so I mean, I think it's important to point that out because when I began this series, my understanding was that, that it was, such a vaccine was actually in principle, theoretically not possible for various reasons. So, all right, so we do have this, this other alternative to look forward to. And again, I think the 7 years is an optimistic assessment. 10 years, 15 years. But the other thing, the National Institutes of Health, I believe, just invested $150 million on the most promising of these, various companies are working on this vaccine. And the same point applies to research on a universal vaccine that applies to cellular agriculture as a way to prevent future pandemics. I mean, like the point that I raised last week, and I'll raise again over and over because I believe it's very important, is like we're estimated to lose here in the United States $8 trillion on this pandemic. And I was advocating that we should be spending at least 1/2 of 1% of that amount to prevent future pandemics. Now that 1/2 of 1% amounts to $50 billion to a lot of people, and to a lot of people that seems like a lot of money. But again, relative to the damage this coronavirus has done, 1/2 of 1% of the cost of this to prevent a next one that is more likely than not to happen within the next 10, 20 years. I mean, so like, yes, so that they really should be, greatly ramping up the funding for universal vaccines. Also, it's beyond baffling how our government can be so clueless in this regard. How our politicians, it's beyond understanding how the scientific community isn't up in arms about this. They're just demanding this greater funding. But all right, so I just wanted to mention that. So like, just moving forward under the premise that the universal vaccine will take 10 years or longer. And again, like, 75% immunity may not be enough. I believe that the better answer is to fund cellular agriculture, clean meat, cell cultured meat, to simply stop farming animals, both factory farms and family farms, as our best way to prevent future pandemics. I want to introduce a moral component to this. So let's assume, like 80, 90% of us in the United States believe in God or a higher power. So let's explore the premise that we are rewarded and punished based on what we do and don't do. Regarding the universal vaccine, it could be yes, that there is, a possibility of discovering this vaccine. And I read just one account where basically, like, it's not only, like trying to find a needle in a haystack, but something like that. It's trying to find a needle in a haystack that the haystack is on a cart that's moving at 60 miles per hour. I don't know. Apparently it's exceedingly difficult. Hopefully artificial intelligence will help with this. But my point is that that this pandemic seems to be punishment from God, and really a very mild punishment, if you're going to appreciate that, relative to the harm we cause. And so, yeah, I've been raising the point that this is, this is our punishment for paying people, paying the farming industry here in the United States and throughout the world, because this is all over. We pay people to very literally abuse and torture, over 70 land animals, chickens, pigs that are more intelligent than dogs and obviously feel pain, cows, sheep. I mean, like, the degree of suffering that we inflict on these animals is beyond unconscionable. It's like so horrific. It's so my point is that, like, that although a universal vaccine may be theoretically possible, God will decide, well, yes, you could have it, but you don't deserve it. As long as you remain in denial about your complicity, your facilitation of this abuse, this torture of so many animals, year after year for decades, that no, you need to be punished to gain greater insight into this cruelty, this horror, and so God may be requiring, demanding the kind of repentance that happens repentance and amends, I suppose, as we transition, as we end the farming of animals. I mean, because ideally 50 years from now, people will look back at ideally, we will grow meat in labs, and ideally people will actually even move away from that, because I think the healthiest diet is plant-based, just completely plant-based. There's a few things that need to be kept in mind. For example, vitamin B is very difficult, if not impossible, to obtain with a traditional plant-based diet. So it has to be supplemented in some way, but perhaps, I may not completely be right on that. There may be some plant sources for that, but the other part of that is that, vitamin B may be able to be manufactured artificially, without, again, having to, actually it would be, like cell cultured vitamin B, just basically developing it in labs from perhaps, the cells of living animals, but in a way that doesn't involve any pain or torture. So yeah, we have to consider that. But yes, a universal vaccine may be theoretically possible, but we may not deserve it as a human population. All right, so let's get back to this proposal. I've sent it off to a couple of people so far. I have a couple of meetings tomorrow about it, and we'll see if it advances. I mean, like on the one hand, it's kind of like, all right, on the one hand, to invest 1/2 of 1% of what the United States, is expected to lose, $8 trillion as a result of this pandemic, to spend that to prevent the next pandemic seems an unbelievable no-brainer. I mean, like, it seems like, it shouldn't be questioned, right? So when it's framed within that context, which, and again, I brought in the example of homeowners insurance. A person who owns a home here in the United States will, over 10 years, spend 7 times the cost of that home for homeowners insurance, to protect it against fires and other, possible means of destruction of the home that are very, very, very unlikely, in contradistinction to this pandemic threat that is inevitable. I mean, it's like beyond inevitable. It's happening now. There are viruses. There was a recall, I think, of about 30,000 pigs in South Carolina several months ago, swine flu. So, I mean, it's again, like the experts tell us, it's not a matter of if, but rather when. And the when, as we've seen in the 21st century, SARS, MERS, I mean, it's getting worse and worse. So yes, well, it just makes consummate sense to spend 1/2 of 1% of what we're losing in this pandemic to prevent future ones. On the other hand, when you think about it, well, 1/2 of 1% is $50 billion. Then, promoting this idea as I've been, I find myself thinking, what might people be thinking about this proposal? It seems kind of like absurd, to demand or request so much. But again, it makes sense. It's an argument that I think will rely on social media. And the good thing is that it's an argument that, we have this example of, for example, homeowners insurance that can be used as a comparison, an analogy. And I don't think it would be a very difficult argument to promote, through social media, through Facebook and Twitter, Instagram, and all. So I hope that happens. All right, so let's just go over the basics again. This pandemic, this coronavirus, COVID-19 disease is zoonotic. Zoonotic meaning it comes from animals. And generally these diseases, a lot of them come from bats, but then bats will bite, infect a chicken or a pig, and then the chicken or pig will transfer that virus to humans. And then we humans will just, it's very contagious, we'll transfer it to each other. So the premise of this series is that the only way, and again, even if they come up with a 75% effective universal vaccine, that's not going to be enough. So the only way to be as safe as we want to be from future pandemics is to stop farming animals. And had this pandemic, for example, happened in 2000 instead of 2019, it would have been far more challenging for us. The reason I say that is because under that circumstance, the only way that our world would be free from future pandemics would be for us to all become vegan, to stop eating meat and dairy and eggs, you know, not just the United States, across the entire world. But we're fortunate, and I don't think it's a coincidental fortune. I think that, you know, this is God, you know, God's running this show. God's basically determining what happens and all. You know, this is punishment from God for how we treat these animals. And so this, you know, in 2013, just 6 years before this pandemic hit us, you know, we were introduced to this brand new technology of cellular agriculture, the proof of concept demonstration in London by Mark Post, where he premiered the world's first cell cultured hamburger patty that was created by just taking, you know, a cell from a cow. This biopsy, it involves no pain at all. And they just basically take this cell or a group of cells and put it in a medium, a growth medium of nutrients in a lab, and then just wait for the cells to multiply and multiply and multiply. And that's how simple this process is. So, so we are very fortunate that we have this technology, because we don't have to go vegan. You know, we have to end factory farming and family farming and transition to this industry. Now, again, I've said it before, under the current rate of funding for this new industry, because there's still research needs to be conducted to be able to scale up to make the products inexpensive enough to compete with the meat and dairy and eggs that we have in the markets now. So, you know, right now there's under $1 billion invested in this industry. And as such, you know, the industry insiders predict that it may take, you know, 10 years or longer to meet those challenges, to solve those research problems. But so the point of you know, of the message that I've been promoting recently is, like, for example, take the case of the vaccines we're working on right now. The soonest that a vaccine had been brought to market for a previous influenza was the influenza pandemic of 1957. And it took them 4 years to develop that vaccine. So now we're pumping a lot of money into, you know, fast tracking this research. And so, you know, we're expected to have a vaccine within a year and a half. You know, so apply that same principle to this cultured cell cultured meat industry. You know, if we invest $50 billion, which again, 0.5% of what we've lost, we're going to lose from this pandemic in this industry, we could have very reasonably, I don't think this is optimistic at all, very reasonably have these products in supermarkets in 3 years, 4 years, if we start now. And we probably won't be coming out of this distancing and, you know, economic shutdown for another year or so. So we'd have, let's say, a year or 2 or 3 where we're still at relative risk for another pandemic. But after that, you know, once we stop farming animals, the risk of pandemics decreases. I would say it would decrease by at least 95%, perhaps 99% or more. You know, it'd be, we could create a virtually pandemic-free world. This applies not just to viral pandemics, but also bacterial pandemics, like the bubonic plague was a bacterial pandemic, and these are also possible through farming. As a matter of fact, experts believe that these superbugs, these antimicrobial resistance strains of bacteria that are developing could pose a greater, threat to our health than climate change even. So again, the point is, by investing these $50 billion, we can, in a few years, create a world where we never have to worry about this again. Whereas if we don't do this, we are going to live in dread, and the odds are not in our favor. It would be reasonable to expect that another pandemic like this could happen within the next 10 years. These pandemics are getting more and more frequent, and this coronavirus is a relatively mild, strain of influenza compared to some of the others. One of the avian flu strains kills about 50% of the people it infects. This one only is killing maybe 2% or so. All right, so that's the message. Now, the other part of this that people have to understand is that we need to not just end family and factory farming of animals here in the United States. We need to end it throughout the entire world, and actually, this might be a blessing in disguise, because there are still almost 1 billion people on the planet that don't have a reliable food supply, that have water scarcity. They just, they suffer from extreme hunger. And so we would have to ensure that these countries, a lot of them are in sub-Saharan Africa, South America, Southeast Asia, we would, to be safe from a future pandemic, we would have to ensure that those populations are provided enough food to sustain themselves, so they don't have to resort to farming animals. Again, it's speculated that the 1918 Spanish flu was a combination of, it was a flu that combined swine flu back then with avian flu. And I think the third combination was there was a strain, a human strain of flu. The three combined to create this very powerful influenza strain, killed between 50 and 100 million people. And the point of that is that that pandemic did not originate in a factory farm. It originated in a family farm, small pig farm, I guess a bird farm. So we have to keep that in mind. And again, so basically we would have to transition from farming animals to this new industries, cell cultured meat, dairy, throughout the entire world. I think it would be a wonderful thing to happen, because that would require unimaginable international cooperation. The kind of competition we see now between countries, where the rich countries like the United States, routinely take advantage of the poor countries, and there's so much inequality, not just here in the United States between the rich and the poor, but throughout the entire world. And so this would be a way of developing the structures, the mechanisms for that kind of cooperation. And the reason that would be a godsend is that it would kind of be a way to begin to create that kind of international cooperation that we also need, not just to protect ourselves from future pandemics, but also to begin to seriously fight climate change. I mean, we're, getting back to this, we humans, it's not just our abuse and torture of animals. It's you know, being religious, I believe that, you know, I don't think God can be so very pleased that in our world, we abort as many lives every year as die of every other cause combined, you know, about between 50 and 60 million abortions each year. That, you know, that's unconscionable, I believe. And again, our indifference to almost 1 billion poor people whose children died at a rate of 10 million each year, you know, from causes that are largely preventable. You know, they need clean water, access to clean water. They need medicines. They need, you know, they need food. I mean, so this, you know, our world is extremely immoral in a lot of ways, and this, I think, this transitioning will give us an opportunity to reform ourselves, to become better people, to deserve, you know, the kind of you know, continued prosperity that we've enjoyed, that so many of us have enjoyed. All right, we've got less than 2 minutes. So yeah, again, a universal vaccine is theoretically possible. They're working on it. It may happen in 7 years. It'll much more likely happen in 10 to 15 years, but we should fund that much more strongly, even so. But $50 billion, 1/2 of 1% of what we're expected to lose from this current pandemic, you know, it really should be more. You know, if the average homeowner spends 4.4% of the cost of their home to insure that home against fires and other damage, that virtually never happens, or never happens, you know, then we should be spending, you know, 4.4% of the $8 trillion we're expected to lose would amount to about $350 billion. You know, ideally we should be spending that much, but I believe $50 billion would be enough to get us these clean foods, these pandemic-free foods in supermarkets in 3-4 years, and we should absolutely be doing that. All right, so I hope you're having a good evening, and I'll see you again tomorrow. Catch this show on White Plains Community Media, Monday through Friday, White Plains, New York, channel 76 Optimum, 45 Verizon. I've been much better about uploading the episodes to YouTube. So like this one, I'm gonna upload it, plan to upload it in a few minutes. All right, so again, have a great day, and I'll see you tomorrow.